Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Keane, a 3-time best-selling author, online fitness coach, and nutritionist here to help you with all things fitness, health, normally by deconstructing expert guests. I've actually forgotten my own introduction because I changed this up a while back. So I've literally forgotten what my own intro is. So apologies for that, but you get the gist. Best-selling author, online coach, nutritionist, etc. What I started doing with the podcast was clipping bits of the interview at the start of the episodes to try and get people invested in it. So hopefully that's been working. And apologies that my voice is nearly gone because I had a very, very late night on Saturday night. I went out for the first time since Christmas and had 6 or 7 pints of cider, Bulmers, my pick of poison at the minute. And it was lovely. It was really good, but literally didn't sleep at all, and then had to travel up and did a cool event with New Dimensions up in Dublin on Sunday, but my voice still hasn't come back yet. So hopefully this podcast will go through all the questions, but my voice probably sounds a little bit different to normal. So bear with me if you hear a pitch going up and down as we go through. But we are going to do a Q&A today. First one in a while. I think it was several months ago that we did a Q&A. I'm going to keep it very fitness based, so training, nutrition, etc. So hopefully you enjoy. First question, when doing strength training and running, how long would your weight session be? So this actually came off the back of me posting up one of my workouts. So this podcast will go out on Monday. I'm doing the Westport half marathon this Saturday. So this will be out 2 days after. And a lot of my training recently has been running based. But I also, and historically, have always done my weight training alongside that. Now, I'm not necessarily saying this is a recommendation. This is what I do, and it's very goal specific for you. So I will give context to why I do it, who should potentially do it as well, and maybe who should do an alternative training plan. For me, something like a half marathon is relatively short compared to other races that I've done. So the furthest I've ran in one go is a 100-mile ultramarathon. I've done several marathons, a few ultras, and several multi-day events, running through the Arctic for 5 days, running through the Sahara for 6 days, things along those lines. So my running base, although I'm not historically a good runner unless I train for it, I can get away with doing probably a little bit more with the weight training side than the average person. So I just want to add this here. To answer the question in terms of what I'm doing, my sessions take about an hour, maybe an hour to maybe an hour, 20 minutes if it's an exceptionally long run. I normally do 20 minutes of S&C, so strength and conditioning style work. It's normally full body, compound lifts, squats, military press, bench press. I might have some functional movements in there, so side lunges, adductor work, glute work, things from my GA Lean Body program. I kind of merge that in a little bit so that I'm getting that S&C strength and conditioning style training, and then I'm doing my run alongside it. One of the very fortunate things for me, since I got into running in 2018, I did Marathon des Sables. That was my first ever ultra, my first ever marathon of any sort, the 6 back-to-back ones in the Sahara. I never get injured when I run, partly because of my training leading up to it, that I do a lot of S&C stuff. So I don't get these niggles and strains that the average person gets. I do a lot of direct core work. I can still get injured, and I've got injured playing football and playing GA and playing soccer and other things along those lines, but never actually on a run or within my run specific training program. So I would have that hour to an hour and 20 minutes depending on the session. That's not every day. I train 5 days a week, normally Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, Thursday, Friday, and a Saturday, or I'll do a Monday to Friday and a weekend off, depending on my schedule at the time. And those workouts normally taper down as the week goes on. So I would have Monday has historically been my long run day or my most difficult training day. I kind of built my life. I'm very fortunate the way I built my life. I run my own business. So I always had Monday as a training day that I could do 3-hour workouts or 4-hour workouts or a 5-hour workout if I had to, if I was training for a really long ultra marathon, and then I kind of do my work stuff around it. Then on Tuesday, it's a shorter sessions. That's when I do most of my Minty check-ins. So I run a business consulting where I work 6-month mentorships with people. I've had actually 2 on the podcast here. Robbie Cassidy was on recently talking about healing lower back pain, and Adrian McDonald was on several months ago talking about building up stubborn fat or work to do with stubborn body fat. Both really good episodes if you want to go back and check on them if you've got those pain points. And they are on Tuesday, so I'll have a shorter session, normally 40 to 60 minutes. Wednesday, historically been a rest day. It's when I do all my podcast batching. I try and record multiple podcasts in a day when I can. Thursday then is a longer session. because it's a recovery day for me. I normally book in deep tissue, or I'll have physio, or I'll have a float tank, or I'll have something that's recovery based built into that day. So I'm able to have a much more intense session, especially if I've rested on the Wednesday. And then Friday is kind of how my body feels. Sometimes on Fridays, my body's wrecked from the deep tissue the day before, or from the yoga the day before alongside a training session. And that extra long session means I might be more tired on the Friday. So I'll just step it back, do a bit of a CrossFit workout or a full body session. And then Saturday is either a longer run, or I do CrossFit classes as well. So I'll do those on a Saturday morning, the team WODs with the CrossFit box that I'm in. And it mixes and matches then. So those sessions rarely go over an hour. Sometimes they go to an hour 20, and the mileage will be dependent on how close I am to the race. So for example, this week, I'll do the 10K run I did this morning will be as long as I go. I'll do one more 5K before Saturday, and then I'll do the 21K half marathon on Saturday. So I do that because it means my performance is good. I'm able to keep my weight training. So I keep all the body composition element, although body composition isn't really a goal of mine. It helps with the function, helps with the performance. If you have an hour runner for 10K, half marathon, full marathon, ultra marathons, you might want to scale back your weight training sessions if you are primarily focused on just improving your running. Now, you can also do the weight training, the functional work, and it can help with your runs, but obviously running is going to be the priority if that's what you're racing for. I don't like running. I have never enjoyed running, but I like the challenge, and I like having ran. I like how it makes me feel having done a 5K or a 10K for my training. I like having done the races because they're not something I'm naturally good at. They're very humbling for me. I'm quite good at things like CrossFit, bodybuilding, weightlifting. I'm quite genetically strong, built like that small little 5'8" hobbit, but just small and stacked. But I'm not naturally good with anything long distance. And because of that, I get a lot of mindset benefits from doing running as opposed to me being naturally or genetically very good at it. So that's why I do it. So I have to keep that strength training in, that weight training in. Otherwise, I find it hard to even get my ass into the gym because I'm not going to go in and just run 5K or 10K. I need, a carrot and stick approach that I'm like, I'll do my weight training and then I'll run after. I'll be warmed up and I'll have got a bit of a pump on and I'll be happy out. So again, sometimes you have to just protect yourself from yourself to get into the gym and get your workouts done. But that's how I do it. And if you're similar to me, it might be an approach worth considering. Next question. Does it matter if you get your protein intake within a 2-hour window, or is it better to have it throughout the day? When you say better, it's generally more optimal to space it through the day, but it's also goal dependent. If performance is the goal, if hypertrophy or building muscle is the goal, or muscle recovery in general, you're better to space it through the day. Your window of time would be around your workout. That's kind of your optimal protein intake window. So if you think about when you're in the gym, when you're out for a run, when you're playing sport, your body is craving amino acids after. And if you don't give it that, you can have some negative effects. The most obvious one is you'll be very sore after and very sore the next day. But there are other effects. Sometimes you can find that hunger is very much elevated and doesn't reduce until you get protein in there. And sometimes people will be like, I trained really hard, I just can't get full after I eat, and we'll add in a protein shake directly after training, and that problem more or less goes away once we have a meal in within that 90-minute window after. So these are very easy things to fix that people can struggle with, myself included in the past. With protein, and I have my nutrition course, which is a certified course, which again guides you and helps you build your own nutritional plan or help other clients, etc. If that's something you want to educate yourself on. I have a whole module in here on protein because it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. Protein and the amino acids that are the building blocks of protein is very context dependent in terms of how much you should have. There's, again, people will say all the way from 0.5 grams per kilogram of body weight all the way up to 2 grams plus per kilogram of body weight, depending on if you're an athlete or if you're a beginner or you're just the average person. If you are working out and training, your protein timing becomes more important. If you are purely talking health and you're following some form of fasting protocol, where autophagy, cell death, is the goal so that you can potentially increase, your body's ability to age well, and you have another goal that's non-performance based, i.e. athletic performance based, gym based, training based, etc., then there might be an argument for having the protein window within that 2-hour window. Some people will do that 22-hour fast, 2-hour window, that warrior style or warrior diet style intermittent fasting protocol. But generally, all other things equal, timing is going to be more important. So spacing out your protein through the day. I quite like to keep it simple, although this is a relatively complex idea, is just have protein at your major meals, your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner. And if you need a shake in between or post-workout, then that's what you do. Anyone that says they find it really hard to hit their protein requirements, I always follow up with the question, well, what does your actual eating day look like? Because if you're having some eggs for breakfast, 2 eggs, you're having a bit of chicken at lunch, and you're having maybe some steak or salmon for dinner, and especially if you have a protein shake in between, it's not going to be difficult to more than go over your protein requirements for the day. If you're following a plant-based diet, a vegan-based diet, I have a vegan-based plan in my BKF online program when I'm coaching people. It can be trickier because you have to do food combinations. So with protein, there's essential amino acids and there's non-essential amino acids. So the essential amino acids are the ones you have to get from food or supplements. Your body cannot make them by itself. Your non-essential amino acids are basically the ones that if you get enough of them, your body can make them from other amino acids. So they're not essential. With plant-based people and individuals, you have to do food combinations because you're not going to get all the essential amino acids in one meal. So you'll have to put your soy with your lentils, or you'll have to put legumes with a different type of sweet potato, etc., so that you're getting all those essential amino acids. I inbuilt those within the recipes in the program, and that's how you approach it. So what I would say here, when you're talking better, that's goal specific. If it's athletic performance, body composition, yes, it's going to be better to space it throughout the day, breakfast, lunch and dinner, protein timing around workouts. If you have a secondary goal, such as health or autophagy or longevity, then having everything within that 2-hour window might be a better fit for you. Benefits of fasted cardio. This is something I've changed my mind about in more recent years, more so with the new evidence coming out, because there's a lot of evidence around fasted cardio now in 2024. Historically, I was very bro on this, and which meant that I loved fasted cardio for body composition. So if I was on a fat loss phase, or I had clients, more so when I was a one-to-one PT just over a decade ago or under a decade ago, I do all my programming online now, I used to factor in fasted cardio for some of my fat loss clients. If you look at the research, the cardio timing matters considerably less than whether you do it or not. So 60 minutes in the day, all other things equal, whether you do 60 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes 3 times a day, or 60 minutes after dinner, you're going to get a very similar body composition response. Not identical, because there's other things going on when it comes to fasting stages, certain hormones being elevated, etc., or decrease in the case of insulin potentially. But it matters so little, I wouldn't worry about it. And when I've changed my mind about what I mean by that is I used to love fasted cardio, partly because it worked really well for me. And the reason it works really well for me, and the reason it can work really well for other people who can have a very strong confirmation bias around fasted cardio, saying, look, it doesn't matter what the science says, it works, is when you do your cardio fasted and the benefits of it, it can be uninterrupted time. Which means that you can prioritize it in the morning normally. It means you can get up and do it, and you can build a routine around it. So you're way less likely to skip it compared to adding it to an end of a workout or having to get in after work when something else might get into, your timeline, work, family emergency, or, even getting stuck in traffic and you decide, actually, I'm just going to skip the cardio today. So you can build it into your routine. Also, the opportunity cost of if you're doubling up your training session. And this is where it really impacted me, and I'll explain. When I was doing fasted cardio, I was also weight training. And the fasted cardio in the morning for me meant that when I went to weight train in the evening, I had several meals already in me, and my workouts were considerably better because I had eaten and I wasn't worried about doing cardio. So I would do half an hour, 45 minutes or an hour in the morning fasted. I would wait several hours until maybe 4 p.m., 5 p.m. And then I would have eaten several meals and then I'd train. And weight training is the real methodology for getting body composition to change in a positive way. Weight loss, fat loss, body composition. For muscle building, it's really obvious. For strength, it's really obvious. You literally get stronger the more weights you lift. and a structured programming, you'll do it in a way that you won't get injured. If you're following the right programming, hypertrophy, 8 to 10 reps, etc., you'll build muscle more efficiently. A lot of us know that already, but with fat loss and weight loss, this is where people fail to think about the importance of weight training in that. When you are having highly effective workouts with weights or resistance training, you are increasing your metabolic rate, which means you're boosting your metabolism. So you might have seen teas and supplements and all this other horse shit out there that's like, well, boost your metabolism by 10x or 100x%. Most of those things are just advertising, a lot of it false advertising. So I wouldn't get too much into it or into the weeds, particularly the teas. That's a pet peeve of mine, but they've been kind of dying away recently, thankfully. Weight training actually does increase your metabolic rate and boost your metabolism, because as you train and as you tear muscle fibers down, your body's metabolic rate goes up as it tries to repair. So you burn calories for 24, 48, 72 hours after, depending on the intensity of the session. With cardio, you burn the calories during the actual session. So cardio doesn't burn body fat. Cardio doesn't help with weight loss. Cardio burns calories, and burning calories can support a deficit, which can support weight loss. Weight training works in a different way. It increases your metabolic rate. So when you combine those two things together, you have a brilliant training recipe for weight loss, assuming that you look at your nutrition alongside it. So for me, I was getting such good results splitting my fasted cardio because my weight sessions were so good. I was lifting more, or I was able to create more time under tension in the session, or I was able to do more reps with similar weights because I felt good. I wasn't stressed about my cardio after, so cortisol was lower. I felt pretty well fueled because my food was good, especially if I did fasted cardio, because I felt really energized after that in the mornings and I felt very woken up. I generally made quite good food choices, and I was mindful that I was training later in the day, so I was exceptionally mindful or attuned to what foods I was eating, and as a result I got really good results with that. So I was biased to it. There's a lot of people who are similar and they'll swear by fasted cardio for X, Y, or Z reason. And I'm not saying not to do fasted cardio. If I was on a body composition phase tomorrow, or for whatever reason I had to be lean for something, I would add in fasted cardio and then I would do my weight training in the evening. That's how I would split up my day. So whether you do it, it's really down to a timing issue. It's normally very easy to structure it into a routine, and it means that you're able to split your sessions so that you're potentially getting a better metabolic bang for your buck, for the lack of a better phrase. Think of increasing your metabolism like burning calories while you sleep. It's like the equivalent of making money while you sleep, but for fat, where you're literally burning more body fat as you're sleeping. Combine those two things together, you can have a recipe for body composition change, weight loss, fat loss, when you put consistency on it. So hopefully that helps in terms of the benefits of fasted cardio, and just a nice little update for 2024 for anyone that's gone back on like really old episodes of the podcast. Tips for pull-ups. Can't do them without a band. With pull-ups, there's generally 3 recommendations here. One is that you work through negative reps, so that you literally use a box, you go up onto a pull-up bar, and then you improve your negative training on that. So you jump over the bar and you lower yourself down gradually. That's one method that can be used, and you can use these in isolation or you can use these as a combination. The other is the bands that you're currently using, where you start with a heavy resistance band and then you gradually reduce back the resistance until you're into a full pull-up. This is actually my preferred method. So if you think of like the black band, different gyms have different colors, but the black band is traditionally a really thick band. You're able to do pull-ups with that band underneath your feet or underneath your knees. You then, as you get stronger with that and you're doing 10 reps, for example, you go down to the green band, which is the next level. And then you go to the purple band, and then you go to the red band, and then you go to the point where you don't have a band at all and you're able to do a pull-up. That might take 6, 12, 18 weeks. Might take 2 weeks, depending on your starting point. So adding that in is my preferred method. The third one then is the assisted pull-up machine. A bit of love-hate relationship, because this works in a similar way where you can increase the resistance. So the lower down or the more weight you put on the assisted machine, the more support you get for the pull-up. And then you just literally progressively overload out of that. So it means that you, as the weeks go by, as you get stronger with your 10 reps, for example, you put the pin down lower or up higher in this case, so that you have less weight pulling you up, so that when you are doing that 6-week block or 8-week block, very few people, unless you have a lot of weight to start with, should be able to do a pull-up in a 6-week training phase if it's a priority. The majority of people, if you're 100 pounds overweight, obviously this is a lower priority. You probably have other things, and it's more difficult. But for most people, And I see this a lot with my female athletes who can't do a pull-up, but they're normally quite strong 4 to 6 weeks on a program. It's normally relatively straightforward to build in, and you make it a priority a couple of times a week with structured programming. But they're the kind of 3 best ways. The last one then is just an inverted row, where you use something like a Smith machine and you do an inverted row so that you're lying with your feet on the ground and you're looking towards the sky. You're holding onto the Smith machine and you're doing pull-ups. And the closer your feet are, if you think of your feet locked in position, the closer your feet are to your body, the easier the movement is. The further your feet are from your body, the harder the movement is. It's similar to a push-up. If you think of push-ups on your knees, the closer your knees are to your body, to your chest, the easier the movement. And then to make it harder or more difficult, you move your knees back until you get into a full push-up position, and then you build in your partial reps until you're able to do a full push-up. That's the progression and regression for a push-up. Pull-ups are similar, and you can use an inverted row for that, where you gradually bring your feet further away from your body, that you get strong in that movement, and then there's more crossover when you're doing pull-ups, because an inverted row, it's not the exact same movement as a pull-up, but there's a lot of similar muscles being recruited. Your lats, a little bit of rhomboids to be fair, depending on how you're pulling in your arm position, your biceps, etc. So there's a crossover there, and it can be done a couple of times a week, 2-3 times a week, even at the end of workouts where it's a high priority, or at the start of the workouts when you're fresh, and you'll be able to build up in a 4 to 6 week period for the majority of people. Next one, opinions on aggressive mini cuts. I actually don't have a major problem with aggressive mini cuts, asterisks, depending on if you have a reverse dieting protocol coming out the other side. So reverse dieting, something I've covered on separate podcasts, is basically where you reverse your calories out after being in a deficit. So a cut is just another terminology word for, or an alternative synonym for a calorie deficit, a cut, losing body fat, etc. So if you have, let's say your maintenance calories is 2,000 calories, you need to eat 2,000 calories every day to stay around the same body composition, the same weight. Anything below that is a deficit. Anything above that is a calorie surplus. So anything below that, all other things equal, should increase fat, or increase fat loss, assuming hormonal balance, etc. All other things equal, a calorie surplus will increase in fat gain or muscle gain, depending on what you're training. And again, I'm using a very bread and butter basic example. There's so many more things going on here. It's not all about calories in, calories out. Your sleep, your stress levels, your hormone levels, your food choice, your training protocols, all of these things play a role. But just for the sake of example, I'm going to use that 2,000 calories. An aggressive mini cut would be a significant drop below maintenance. So that would be something like a 1,200 calorie plan. And unless you're a 7-year-old girl, you shouldn't be eating 1,200 calories per day. It's way too low for most people. And the problem and the downside, and this is to go off tangent to come back on, because I think this is useful information. One of the downsides of aggressive mini cuts or aggressive diets, so slimming clubs are notorious for this as well, where they'll dramatically cut your calories. Some coaches do this too, unfortunately. None on this podcast, but some coaches will dramatically and intensely cut calories with a client for a 6 or 12 week period. And if you aggressively cut someone's calories to 11, 12, 1,300, especially when their maintenance is 2,000, they're going to lose a lot of body fat. They're going to lose a lot of weight with that. Body fat and weight being two different things. Fat is the amount of fat in your body. Weight is the numbers on a scale. But I'll use them interchangeably for the example here. You will lose a lot of weight and a lot of body fat. The problem is with some of those slimming clubs, or some of those coaches, unfortunately, is they'll get a great before and after picture. Then they will bring more people into that system, and it leaves the client in the lurch when they come out of it, because if you don't have a reverse dieting protocol, which means that you're gradually increasing your calories for at least half the time that you decrease them. So let's say, for example, your aggressive mini cut is 1,200 calories for 12 weeks, and that's what you're planning to do. You would need to bring your calories back up over a 6-week period after that 12 weeks. If you don't, you can have a very negative rebound, which is normally in the form of weight gain, which has its whole host of other negative effects, self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence, even metabolically. You're not going to do too much damage metabolically in 12 weeks. You can do a bit, but again, when people think I've ruined my metabolism, you're talking excessively dieting or doing things that are out of alignment with what your body needs for months and years, not weeks. But I'm not saying to do it for 12 weeks either. But a reverse dieting protocol, and I go through this in the nutrition course as well, this is its full module in there because this is very important for coaches to know in particular, is a reverse dieting protocol out. So if you're at 1200 calories, your first week might be 1300 calories, then your second week might be 1400 calories, third week might be 1500 calories, fourth week might be 1600 calories until you get back out to your maintenance or above. And that's how you'll reverse diet out. That's your reverse dieting protocol. So an aggressive mini cut can be effective before things like holidays, photo shoots, a wedding, etc. But you need to have a reverse dieting protocol coming out. Otherwise, you will have a very negative effect, normally body composition wise, with your weight going up, your body fat climbing in a very short period of time, which can also make it more difficult to lose it again, which is kind of a problem. And when you think of those slimming clubs and those coaches, it's very difficult sometimes to offer advice. And I've had people come into my BKF online program for coaching who are coming in with an aggressive cut, and I have to explain to them, look, we have 6 weeks coaching here. We can't drop your calories any lower. We have to bring them back up because your metabolism is fecked. And if we don't do that, you're literally just going to feel rubbish. Your energy is going to be low. You're going to get all the hormonal disruption, and you might not get the weight loss that you desire or fat loss you desire in these next few weeks. But we need to get your metabolism back to where we can actually put it into a controlled deficit, so you can do that over an extended period of time. And sometimes that can be difficult for people to hear, because with things like calorie cutting or aggressive mini cuts, it's normally all nutrition. Not always, but sometimes people do excessive exercise too. But in a lot of cases, it's nutritional focused. And what I mentioned earlier about weight training, what weight training does and quality sleep does is they allow you to increase your metabolic rate. This is the real secret for long-term weight loss and long-term fat loss, is weight training to increase your metabolism, sleeping well to enhance the recovery and keep hormones balanced so you're making better food choices the next day, rinse, repeat on cycle. Like literally try and build that into your routine or your life cycle until you hit your desired weight. And then you can bring your calories back up to maintenance, and you'll feel a lot better, and you'll have the body composition you want, the strength you want, the fitness you want, etc. Aggressively cutting calories can have a very negative impact on everything from hormones to health to energy levels, and not to mention your mood and gut microbiome, which can get significantly disrupted from the increased levels of cortisol, your stress hormone, from excessive dieting and an aggressive mini cut. So as I mentioned, if you're doing it for a 6-week period and you have an escape plan, you have a reverse dieting protocol, it's not the end of the world. But professionally, I'm not a huge fan of them, and I don't generally recommend people do them. But there is context where it's going to be okay. Just have your escape plan alongside it. So next question, Brian, same core or ab workouts consistently with progressive overload, or does it matter? This is a really interesting question. So when you're looking to build your core or your abs, I've done a lot of these reels on social media, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Facebook Reels, etc., about exercises for your core and for building out abs. So I'll preface this with the very obvious statement, but I feel I have to add it for those who don't know. Most of us have abs underneath layers of fat. Not everybody, some people have to genetically train them, but 95% of people have abs if they get their body fat low enough. And you get your body fat low enough by controlling your calories in a deficit. Again, I know I'm saying the same thing that you've heard me say a million times, but unfortunately the science doesn't change, so I have to anchor it at the beginning of this. However, there is the thinking and philosophy that abs are built in the kitchen, but that's not true. Low body fat is built in the kitchen. Abs are built in the gym, and particularly the shape. And with core and ab workouts, there's two primary approaches people take. I've done both, and I'll give you my personal preference, but it really is experimenting with what you like. One is that you're doing weighted ab exercises, but you're progressively overloading them. So things like weighted crunches, dumbbell wood chops, Roman chairs with a weight in between your legs. They're weighted exercises for your abs and core, and you work them in hypertrophy parameters. 8 to 10 reps, even 8 to 12 reps if you want to go on the higher range. Some people even go up to 15. And as you get stronger, you progressively overload. Progressively overload is basically where you just increase the weight to fail at your rep range. So if you're trying to do 10 dumbbell wood chops with a 10 kilo dumbbell, and if you're after doing that for 3 weeks in a row, and that weight feels too light and you could do 12, 13, 14, 15 reps, you have to progressively overload it up. So you go up to an 11 kilo dumbbell or a 12 kilo dumbbell. That's progressively overloading in a nutshell. So you can apply that to your abs. I've done that. I do that, but generally more for function. I find when I'm adding weights to my core, I get more functional and I'm more strong, particularly for sport. I still play a little bit of gab, bit of soccer, more so for sport. When it's body composition, abs are a little bit of a funny body part. Abs and calves are kind of the general ones that you'll see people doing very high volume on. So things like 25, 50, 100 repetitions on an exercise, normally body weight based. Calf raises, if it's calves, they'll do it obviously with weight and they'll progressively overload that. But it's normally very, 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 very high volume with reps compared to other body parts. And what's weird about this is if you look up the literature and you look up the science, you'll see that there's a bit of a split. You will have schools of thought, and I've had some on the podcast who will say you should always train your abs and core with the scientifically supported hypertrophy parameters, 8 to 10 reps, 3 to 4 sets, 60 to 90 second rests. You have others that will say because of the way that your abs are built and they're literally holding you up, same as your calves holding up your legs, they can experience and withstand much higher repetitions in exercise, assuming you're not weighting them. And when I've historically trained for body composition to get a six pack, to make sure that it stays, and I'm doing things like back in the day with bodybuilding shows and photo shoots and things along those lines, I always went very high volume. I went very, very, very high volume. I found that when I weighted and used weights, I got quite blocky and thick around my waist. I'm genetically quite short and stocky, as I mentioned earlier, Hobbit build, hands up for the Hobbit Club. So I didn't weight them. I didn't weight them generally. I always went body weight, and I found that my appearance and aesthetics were better that way. Now, at age 36, my goals have completely changed. I don't have body composition goals outside of, you just want to look nice in a t-shirt or without a t-shirt. It's normally functional for sport, for training, for longevity. I'm at the stage in my life now at 36 where I'm thinking about, okay, I want to be able to move well when I'm 70. I look at my mum who's in her 60s and still plays football and still plays soccer. I'm like, I want to be able to play sport in my 60s. I want to be able to move well in my 70s and my 80s. So I'm making decisions now that are going to be helpful for Brian of that age. And that comes with adding resistance and adding weight to those cores so that it's more functional. So the long and the short of it is experiment with both. Some people will find they respond better with weights, especially those who are a bit more ectomorph. The longer, naturally thinner people will find that they've kind of got abs anyway, and they have to use weights to really get them to pop and stand out. Your traditional mesomorph or endomorph or smaller, stockier person like me who's quite muscular, or someone who puts on weight quite easily or is quite short and stocky, they might want to go body weight with higher volume. Again, there isn't a one size fits all, but as I mentioned earlier, abs aren't built in the gym, aren't built in the kitchen. Abs are built in the gym. Low body fat is built in the kitchen. Combine those two things together, you'll have a really good core, flat stomach, your six-pack abs, etc., with consistency over time. Okay, next question. Brian, important strength training exercises for women over 40. This is an interesting question because I've been working, I would say, predominantly with women over 40 and some over 50 in the last few BKF online programs. And thankfully, it's a very straightforward answer. I will give a little bit of context and where to go for more on this. But compound lifts, strength training works really well here. So I like 8 to 10 reps, again, that hypertrophy range. But as you get older, you'll find that decreasing the volume and the repetition can be really helpful. So something I've done with some of my women, not all, because when you have a body composition goal, it's always more beneficial alongside more practical to do a training program very specific to that. Whereas when you drop the weights or the repetitions, on compound lifts, squats, deadlifts, military press, etc., down to 5-6 reps, you're into more of a strength phase. But for women who are in, say, perimenopause, for example, or even going into menopause, you can make those adjustments. And I will do that with some of my women when they're struggling, even just to reduce some of the symptoms, and they'll improve that strength and that bone density by decreasing the volume that they're doing and increasing the weight so that they're lifting heavier. But the strength training for women over 40, again, compound lifts, if you are prioritizing certain body parts, so how I split my BKF online program, and I'll use that for context, although lots of coaches will do something similar, and you might be working with a coach and it'll be just, you can bounce this off them. A full body split throughout the day or throughout the week. So a 5-day split for my female program. Now, there's different versions of the program, beginner, intermediate, advanced. I coach on that program, so I do make changes and tweaks to it. But the normal way we split it is a kind of a push-pull legs, glute hamstrings, cardio abs day. That's kind of the split. So push is going to be glute focused, a little bit of shoulders, a little bit of chest. Pull is going to be back, biceps, rear delts, or potentially pulling a deadlift from the ground. Glutes and hamstrings, or legs are going to be lower body. So glutes, hamstrings, quads, etc. Glutes and hamstrings are going to be obviously glutes and hamstrings, and the cardio abs is going to be more cardio based, either HIIT, low intensity, mixed with some ab training. Some of the exercises in there are compound lift based, so bent over barbell row, dumbbell or barbell squat or kettlebell squat, lunges, again, compound lift to a degree. Reverse lunges being my particular favorite for females because it's more glute focused. Glute bridges fall into that category. Military overhead shoulder press, bench press in some cases. I don't do it with every female, but for some it can work well. And adding those in consistently with that rep range alongside isolation. So your kickbacks for your glutes, or your hamstring curl, or your leg extensions, or even biceps to a degree, or side lateral raises for your shoulders. All decent exercises that work to support the compound lifts. But you want to have, if you think of your training program as a woman over 40, like a cake, all your ingredients are in the compound lifts. Your isolation exercises are the frosting and the icing and the cherry on top. So look at your training like that. And as a woman over 40, being consistent with it 3, 4, or 5 times a week, depending on your routine, you'll get really good results with that. And final question, Brian, how many hours of sleep do you get per night? I've mellowed, because I used to be I've done actually full 180 on this. No. Yeah, full 180. 360, I'd be back to where I fucking started. I've never been great with maths. I've done a complete 180 on this. So in my 20s, and I'm 36 now, I'll be 37 in December. In my 20s, I was a bit of a team no sleep, meaning that I thought sleep was something we just had to do, but I tried to get away with the bare minimum because it just took away from training time, work time, all these other things I thought I could be doing. What I didn't know then that I know now is that sleep is a great force multiplier, i.e., when sleep is good, everything else in life feels easier, from relationships to business to working out to food choices. A lot of scientific reasons around this. The nutrition one's very easy to go through. You'll have balanced ghrelin and leptin, particularly. Your hunger and satiation hormones will be more balanced. Your insulin levels can be more balanced. You will feel more energy for your workouts, which will go back and increase that metabolic rate I talked about earlier. If you're resistance training or fasted cardio, you'll burn more not even fasted cardio in general, you'll burn more calories during the session. So that can all help with body composition. So it's a great force multiplier for me, meaning that if I get a good night's sleep, I find everything else in life a lot easier. I also have a history of gut issues. So IBS is something that I've talked about on a few podcasts. I actually have Kristen Jackson coming back on, the IBS dietitian, for a second episode soon. You can check out her first episode if you suffer from IBS. IBS for me is stress related, which I've got very good at managing in recent years, particularly since I started meditating more. My meditation is something that took me a decade to get right. I couldn't meditate. I was one of those people whose mind just raced and did everything that it was not supposed to do. But what I started to understand about meditation, which is so ironic, is the people who think they can't meditate are the people who need to meditate the most. And when I heard the example of sitting down with meditation and just letting all those thoughts just ramble and run through, if you think of it like an inbox in your phone or on your laptop, you want to get to inbox 0. That's effectively what meditation is, where you're just working on the thoughts that are coming up today, not all these past thoughts and all the thoughts of the future. And I sat down every day for about 60 days in a row, and I just, whatever thoughts came up, I just let them come up. And what happened after about 60 days was it felt like my inbox had gone to 0, that all the thoughts coming up were just very much coming and I was letting them pass through me. And it's evolved because now I try and observing my thoughts, where I try and pull myself out of my body, and I understand that I'm not my thoughts. They're basically like river. If you think of a river and this fish jumping up in the river and you're on the side trying to catch them, your thoughts are effectively like that. There's more fish just coming up all the time, and trying to catch them just leads to a lot of frustration and stress, and they slip. Whereas if you just let the fish go and jump through the river, like your thoughts, that's effectively what meditation is. It's knowing that you're not your thoughts and it's a separate thing from you. The same as, the headphones you're listening to now or your phone are separate things from you. Your thoughts are effectively separate things for you in meditation. That's where you want to put your mind when you're going into that. So a lot of my IBS related stress went away when I started to meditate. Food choices were a big one on that. There's certain foods that I just can't really eat. Red wine is the trigger. I know it's not a food, it's a drink, but I have certain foods and drinks that are just triggers that I just don't eat anymore. But something that does impact my IBS very badly is if I had a poor night's sleep. I find that I just am digesting food that well, and my risk of an IBS flare-up goes very, very high the next day. So when I started to draw all these dots, normally, or more so in probably the last 5, 6, 7 years, when I hit my 30s, I started to prioritize sleep. So as of now, I get a minimum of 8 hours every night. Minimum. Again, the weekend was an exception because I was out all night having the crack, and it was so much fun, and I was fucking locked, so it made no difference. But I felt it the next day, and I felt it 2 days later, and I'm feeling it today. But I don't regret it. Sometimes you have to take these trade-offs and just enjoy your life and go and do your things with some amazing people. And so I had that, but I will try and pay back some of that sleep debt over the next week. I talked on the podcast with Tom Coleman recently, who's a sleep expert, about paying back sleep debt. And that concept, for anyone not familiar, just means that if you've slept really badly, say Monday to Friday, you sleep extra at the weekend to try and pay back. You slept 6 hours every night and you sleep 10 hours on Saturday, Sunday to try and pay some of the sleep debt back. He said from the research, and I've looked into this myself as well, it's not ideal, but it's better than not doing it at all. And I prioritize generally 90% of the time, 99% of the time, give myself a bit of credit here, to get those 8 hours, with the exception of last weekend being, as I said, a pull-out in a otherwise priority of 8 hours most nights. But sleep requirements don't stay stagnant, mine included. If I'm training very intensely, my sleep requirements go up. So my nutrition very rarely changes. And so all my other things in my life are equal, except for my training. My training volume will go up if I'm training for a race or training for something. I've got Kilimanjaro, and I'm bringing a group up Kilimanjaro. There's still space for that, actually. If anyone's interested in Kilimanjaro in October, just pop me a DM on Instagram. I'll send you the details. And so once we start training for Kilimanjaro, I'll be doing mountain climbs alongside my regular training. So my sleep requirements are going to go up, and I'll probably need 9 hours some nights, and even 10 hours if it's been a really or particularly intense training day. And something that people fail to consider, myself included, is sleep requirements change. Same as your calorie intake. If you're lying on the couch all day versus training twice a day, your calorie intake on both days is different because your output is considerably higher on the day you're training twice, where it's considerably lower the day you're lying on the couch all day. Sleep is the same. If you've been lying on the couch all day, you probably get away with maybe 6, 7 hours, 8 hours if you're getting on particular nights. Whereas if you've trained twice a day, you might need 10 to get the exact same recovery as you would on a non-training day. So you want to make the adjustments. I have a routine for sleep because I am historically a very, very poor sleeper. So I generally get off devices, definitely social media, 2 hours before bed, nearly all the time. I use blue light blocking glasses if I'm on the phone. So your phone and all screens in the sun, to be fair, does this too, but nighttime, it's mostly screens that we're looking at, emanate blue light, and blue light can block increases cortisol. I think actually I need to look into if it increases cortisol. It definitely blocks melatonin. So if you think of melatonin, that's your sleep hormone. Cortisol is your stress hormone, but cortisol rises in the morning. It's actually the thing that wakes it up. So if you think of it like a weighing scale, in the morning, your melatonin is low, your cortisol is high, and it wakes you up and you get out of bed. At nighttime, that shifts in the opposite direction. So your cortisol decreases, or should be decreasing, and your melatonin should be going up. That's why it's really important to de-stress at nighttime, because you can be tired but wired at the same time. So if you have all these thoughts running in your head, or stress is high, it's why people get so negatively impacted by, mild or short bursts of acute anxiety and insomnia, because their brain is racing at nighttime and they can't sleep. And then that has a whole host of negative effects, some of which I've mentioned. So you want to look at that at nighttime. And blue light blocking glasses, again, you can get these on Amazon or anywhere online. They just block out that blue light so that you're not getting that melatonin block, so that you're actually able to get a really good night's sleep. And then finally, I use CBD oil, which I couldn't be a bigger fan of. I use the Hemp Heroes one. I'm a brand ambassador for Hemp Heroes as well. So I do have a code. It's Brian K10. Well, I put in the description. Yeah, I put in the description if I remember after this. Just Brian K10 at the checkout will give you 10% off any order, and you can keep that and reuse it over and over again. But CBD oil, the extra strength one, is what I use before bed. And that's been life-changing for me. I use magnesium as well, Mag 365. I have no affiliate or representation with them, but I use Mag 365 before bed as well. And then the Hemp Heroes CBD, normally 2 hours or 3 hours before I go to bed. And that really helps with my sleep. I'll shower before bed because of core temperature reasons, and it just keeps your core temperature balanced when you go to bed. And I try and keep that routine as much as possible because it's not about how long you're in bed, it's about how high the quality of sleep is. Like, you could be in bed for 12 hours, but if you're getting up every 2 hours to go to the toilet or because you're stressed, then it's kind of irrelevant being in bed that duration of time because you're not getting good sleep. You're better to get 6 hours of uninterrupted high quality sleep than 10 hours of really broken sleep. I would recommend 2 resources off the back of this. One is Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep. If you've gone to briankeenfitness.com, I've got my top 50 book recommendations on there in order. Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker is pretty high. I think it's in the top 10. Fantastic book on sleep. Nick Littlehales also has a really good book on sleep. He's been on the podcast. He was the treble winning sleep coach for the Man United treble winning team in the 90s, and he worked with Cristiano Ronaldo as his sleep coach. So very high up in terms of sleep expert. And then the episode with Tom Coleman, who has helped Conor McGregor historically with his sleep when he was competing in UFC. So people who are very well respected within their space, 2 of which have been on this podcast and might be useful follow-ups if you are a poor sleeper looking to get a better night's sleep. But my routine at the minute, which is a very long-winded way of answering how many hours of sleep do you get, which is 8 plus or 8 to 10. I could have answered it in a second, but I wanted to give context because if you're a poor sleeper, historically like me, you want all the information on it. And if you're not a poor sleeper, you probably skipped this question anyway because it's not relevant to you. So there's all 8 questions today, all fitness-based, sleep-based, nutrition-based. Hopefully it helped. Let me know your thoughts. How did you enjoy it? I was doing the Ask Brian series for a while. I've done a couple of those on YouTube as well, but I wanted to bring back this long-form Q&A for this week as well. Just kind of keep it mixed it up. But as I mentioned, similar to last week's episode with Orla, where we were talking about we're talking about everything last week in last week's podcast. A couple of things on there that we didn't get to give enough context on, so we'll have to do another episode down in the future and kind of give a bit more context on some of the things we were talking about. But that was a long form fly in the wall conversation. This is back to the Q&A. So I use all the recommendations on guests, who you want to have on, etc., based on feedback on it. So yeah, hopefully it helped loads. Anything else you want to look up on me or any other questions, check out Instagram. Hit me up on DM on there. Let me know how you found the podcast. And as always, if you are listening and you haven't left a rating or review, that would be amazing. Helps massively with the growth of the show. If you listen on Spotify, you can leave a rating. Just literally click 5 stars would be amazing. But if you're like, no, fuck Brian, he's a dickhead, you don't give me 1 star. You can give me 1 star if it's honest. But I feel like you can get to the end of this podcast if you're like, he's a 1-star fucker. So 5 stars would be amazing. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can leave a rating and a review. So I read all those. Really, really helpful for what guests you like, what kind of content and topics you like. And as I mentioned, it helps with the growth of the show and allows me to bring on really, really good guests that can help you on your journey. But anyways, that's everything from me. That's my ask at the end of the episode. Thank you so much for listening. Catch you all next week.